Okay, hello. Just gonna start off by saying that this is going to be part one of several. I've got about 40 minutes worth of behind the scenes footage. It's taking me a while to edit. I have to split my time up between going to like a real life adult job and then doing this back home. So I'm just gonna split it up into 3 parts and release them one after another. At the end, I'll probably cut them all together. Okay, so now go watch the intro from when I thought it was all gonna be one video. Hello, it's me, your close personal friend, youtube.com/mootroidXproductions. It looks like a lot of you enjoyed my film, The Sky Below, or at least those of you who watched it enjoyed it, which, is not that many. Apparently YouTube is intent on making sure as few people see it as possible. I think that's mainly due to the fact that it doesn't have the words Halo or Power Rangers anywhere in the title. Literally the only reason The Sky Below hit 10,000 views recently is that I linked to it at the end of Valentine's Day 2, which is still getting views somehow. Not that I'm complaining, it's basically the only thing keeping the lights on around here. Also, apparently less than 10% of you will ever actually get notified when I upload a new video. Like, comment, sub, ring the bell, did you know I have a Patreon? Anyway, I thought I'd do my best to explain all the work that went into this film. Behind the scenes stuff is usually more interesting than the thing itself, partially because I like looking for tricks I can use in my own work, so maybe once you've seen this video you'll have a better understanding of my creative process. Also, I'm reading off a script. I don't speak this well in real life. I use the word smeg a lot, for personal reasons. Okay, so I'll start before The Sky Below was even a thing. Malice by Chris Wooding is one of my favorite books ever. Not many stories have so completely understood that sort of fascination and wonder I feel at the prospect of exploring a new terrifying alien world. It was actually kind of cathartic to read about this character who found himself trapped in a dangerous, horrifying, and deeply beautiful realm and realize he would rather be there than safe back home. There's only a small handful of books and video games and other stories that have made me feel that same kind of pull to keep exploring deeper and deeper no matter what kind of danger might lie ahead. Metroid, Hollow Knight, Subnautica, Bionicle, to name a few examples. Mountains of Madness by H.P. Lovecraft is a pretty good example too, but that guy was really freaking racist. I didn't expect him to be that racist in the text of the pages themselves. That guy is really racist. Fellow YouTuber Jacob Geller did an excellent job explaining that feeling in his video essay, Fear of Depths. So from now on, I refer to that feeling as the depths. Capital D. Trademark. So I didn't have a name for that feeling at the time, but in the summer of 2019, towards the end of my junior year of college, I was bored during a final critique or whatever, so I drew a handful of sketches kind of chasing that feeling I got from Malice. Kind of trying to imagine myself as an explorer character in a world of mystery and danger and beauty. It could have been called self-insert fanfiction right at the beginning, but it pretty quickly expanded to be its own story. I don't write fanfiction, I swear. It was one time. So once classes ended, I spent the rest of that summer preparing for my senior thesis film, which was a project meant to be the culmination of everything you learned during your time as an animation major, or something like that. I had 3 main ideas: a cinematic film meant to capture the beauty and majesty of dragons. I really like dragons. A horror film about having to put on a smile despite the injustice and violence around us, based on these characters I was drawing in middle school around the time I realized I had depression, which I promise is not related. And an atmospheric film about an underground explorer fleeing to the surface from some monster he'd unleashed. Originally, I was planning on the dragon film being my main idea. I even spent a few weeks sculpting a dragon statue for it, but when I pitched my 3 ideas to the class, everyone could kind of sense that I was getting more and more excited about the underground explorer idea as I talked more about it and tried to describe that feeling I got, which I now know is the depths. So they urged me to choose that film instead, and I completely agreed with them by the end of it. The story and character started to take shape as I worked on some earlier concept sketches. Originally it was going to be a straightforward chase scene, but I decided to add some build-up to establish the setting and the character's motivations. I gave him an actual goal, the salad, and made him fear the surface so that he would have to overcome that fear in order to escape. I also finally named him Ainli, taken from the Hebrew phrase Ainli, meaning I have none. I will pepper in the fact that I'm Jewish. In those first few sketches, I imagined him as a human character in a mask. Not because he was a self-insert character, I swear, but I decided I would rather invent a whole new species. So the mask became his actual face. I altered his proportions and posture until he no longer resembled anything that could be called a human. I gave him these big, creepy, gnarly fingers and gigantic, thick nails that would give the impression of a creature that has to, dig for roots and bugs. I also took some inspiration from subterranean creatures like moles when I was designing a new shape for his face. Where he once looked like some kind of ninja with a headscarf and a kabuki-inspired mask, now he's just a little baby. Just a little baby creature. A baby dirt boy who wants his salad. I would kill and die for Ainli. In the very beginning, before working on the storyboard, I made a bunch of beat boards, which is basically just a bunch of vaguely interconnected scenes and moments and shots that I wanted to include. And eventually I used those to piece together a larger story. There's a lot of little images in here that I never really used in the final film. Some of them I kind of wish I had, but I just didn't really have the time. Most of my time working on this film was spent during pre-production, mainly storyboarding and fabrication. I couldn't actually start animating until about 3 months until the final project was due, so I only had about 3 minutes of footage shot by the time I had to present. It was an impressive 3 minutes though, and my professors were all like, yeah, it's good enough. So I graduated with flying colors regardless. Ironically, the coronavirus lockdown was the only reason I got that much finished on time. Spending all that time at home meant I could work non-stop instead of having to lug everything back and forth every day. And the shift to online made it much easier to neglect all my other less important classes. Sorry, but I just do not give a single care about art history. Okay, so in the film itself, the first minute or so was actually shot last. I decided I didn't like the original opening shot very much and it wouldn't make a very good impression on new viewers. Also, very few people I showed it to picked up on the fact that his whole motivation was food. I kind of kept forgetting that while I was watching it too, so I decided I should have a completely different introduction that establishes his search for food right off the bat. So now, the first thing you see is Ainley's hand, and that should immediately key you into the fact that he's not a human character. He's also reaching for salad, so first few seconds of the film you already got his motivation. His hands were one of the hardest things to make when I was working on the puppet. Most action figures have interchangeable hands, so if you want to animate someone with a different hand pose, you just gotta yank it out and swap in a new one. But that would kind of restrict the sort of expression I wanted to get from his fingers, so I started trying to find a way to make his hands posable. I built the puppet using a sticky bones armature, but those hands didn't really match his design, and those finger joints were just too weak and floppy to layer any kind of skin or glove over them. Instead, I inserted these square brass tubes into his wrists and used those to connect the new hands. I do wish I had the Ainley puppet with me, but for those who don't know, I'm on the other side of the country right now. I'm working on Robot Chicken Season 11. So I started by sculpting a solid model of his hand. I only needed one because they're both symmetrical with a dual thumb design. Next, I built some aluminum wire skeletons to give him posable fingers. Aluminum wire is best for animation, by the way. Steel will just bend back every time you try to bend it. Copper will break. To add flesh, I first tried casting and molding in silicone, but I was very new at that kind of thing, and I just kept getting air bubbles and they kept tearing and the wire kept punching through it. It was also very messy, and I wasted a lot of silicone in the process. Silicone molding is something I'd like to try more in depth in the future, but I was kind of on a schedule. I tried a similar process using a material called Sugru, moldable glue, the tagline says, but it was a little harder than silicone and it was prone to tearing whenever I tried to bend it. So at that point it was a couple days before I knew I had to start shooting, and I was beginning to panic, and then I got a package in the mail and I realized I had backed this Kickstarter for a material called cosplay a year ago, and the package just happened to arrive right before I was about to give up. So I basically just started over, made a bunch of aluminum skeletons and sculpted onto them from scratch. I didn't use a mold or anything, I did it all by hand. Also, they were this really uncanny flesh color before I painted them. It looked kind of creepy. I thought it was funny. I had to make quite a few of them, 15 or 20, because aluminum wire wears out after a while. Silicone could go from here to here, no problem. And the cosplay wasn't as soft as silicone, so I had to sculpt them in a couple of different poses to start from. So I sculpted a bunch of hands like this. They would only move that far. And I sculpted a bunch of hands like this. They would only move that far. Okay, so getting back to the film itself, you might notice that it has a very specific color palette. This is the first time I paid close attention to what kind of colors I was using in a movie. Normally I just sort of throw things on the screen and see what works. Early in the pre-production phase, though, I made what's called a color script. The idea is to figure out the meaning of each individual color and then how the color changes to match what's going on in the film. It's not just oh, the screen is blue now, that means he's sad. You gotta figure out what each color means symbolically in the specific context of your film. So the opening scenes of the film are all in warm colors, mainly orange and yellow. The orange lighting in this case represents the entirety of the underground. It's warm and comfortable, but not exactly happy. It's all sort of stagnant and dead down here. And the only things he can eat are a contrasting green, which highlights the fact that they aren't really native to this environment. So what you should pick up from that is that if he wants to eat, he'll have to go somewhere else. An important part of character development is to bring what they want into conflict with what they need. That way they can make a choice that defines a moment of growth. One of our professors taught us a really catchy little phrase to help get that idea across. It's, what does he want? What does he need? What's at stake if he doesn't succeed? It's a cute little rhyme for you there. What Ainley wants is to stay safe underground where everything is familiar and predictable. What he needs is to eat, but he's running out of food underground. What's at stake, of course, is his life. If he stays, he'll starve. So what he wants is orange, what he needs is green. To further tie him to the underground, I actually made him carry around the source of the orange light. The lantern functions as kind of a security blanket. It brings him comfort, and it's what lets him stay in the caves. Without that lantern, it's all just black. So now we get to the original opening shot. Like, this was the first thing I shot while I was working on the film. It was going to be the introduction, but it doesn't look good. I don't like it. This opening shot was one of the most grueling animation experiences I have ever had to suffer through. The lighting took a couple of hours to get right, and his walk cycle was overly complicated with the lantern, but what really grilled my cheese was the fact that the lantern kept going out. I had to reshoot it a few times, and I'm still not happy with the end result. I was feeling pretty apprehensive about having to animate several minutes of this, but then I got to the shot where he tries to eat the rock. Now that I didn't have to wrestle around with his unusual walk cycle, I could just focus on his acting and his expressions, and I started having a lot of fun. His facial expressions were a really important part of his character design, so I'm glad they turned out so well. I modeled, 3D printed, and hand-painted about 20 different expressions. They connect to his head using a magnet, so they'll stay in place when I need them to, but I can still pull them off with minimal resistance. And instead of using the original Sticky Bones neck, which had a human design, I made a completely new neck out of bionicle joints. Also, here's a fun fact. That sound effect when he bites the rock, that is a recording of me biting a rock. It was a horrible experience. I rate it 2 out of 10. I would have given it a 0, but it was educational. Also, for those of you who don't know, Ainley was voiced by Pocket, my best boy. Contrary to popular belief, this was not Pocket's voice acting debut. We first worked together on my older Bionicle short, Hello Human. Also, let's take a moment to talk about the set here. Pretty much every part of the set was made using the same materials. I started by cutting shapes out of styrofoam with a hot knife and gluing them together, and then I coated everything in a thick layer of Durabond plaster. I also used latex house paint, which is somewhat flexible, which was a very good thing because the Durabond turned out to be really brittle and it kept crumbling when I touched it. Also, see all these notes here? That was me trying to figure out how much styrofoam I would need to make the entire temple. In the end, though, that proved to be completely obsolete. I just filled my entire living room with styrofoam. This isn't even a third of the amount of styrofoam I used. I was drowning in this stuff. Okay, hello, it's Charlie from the future. I just want to interject here and say that I cut all the styrofoam using a hot knife, also known as a foam cutter, for obvious reasons. You could use a saw and just carve through it, but that'll leave a huge mess. The hot knife, meanwhile, will give off a ton of fumes, so you should really only use that outside or in a well-ventilated area, etc. A mask like this will not be enough to protect you. You'll want to use a respirator. The stone bridge is one of my favorite set pieces, but it was also a lot harder to make than pretty much anything else in the cave scenes, mainly due to the fact that I had to attach a sheet of metal to the top. My dad and I may have violated some OSHA regulations when we were cutting out the right shape. I use steel sheets for the ground wherever possible because the Sticky Bones armature has these really strong magnets in the toe and the heel. And that was a huge help when it came to balance. Ainley would never have stayed upright otherwise. The only other options would have been to attach a rig to his back or to just screw his feet down into the ground. And I didn't really have the time to clean up either of those in post. So now this shot, the shot of him finding the temple. It's one of my favorite parts of the entire film. The animation is pretty simple. He's just looking around. But I think the atmosphere is exactly what I was going for. I wanted this entrance to feel huge and imposing and very, very old. The geometric patterns contrast with the natural caverns behind him, and hopefully it makes you wonder who built this place and what could have happened to them. Here's another fun fact for you. This shot is almost a perfect match to a specific panel from Malice. I just really, really like mysterious ancient underground temples. Alright, so that will be the end of part 1. Thank you for watching that, all 5 of you who did. I really hope you enjoyed it, really hope you found it interesting enough that you're going to watch the next one. In the meantime though, please, like, comment, subscribe, all that. Ring the bell. It will make you happy if you ring the bell, I promise. Alright, see you next video. Farewell. I love you. I should probably talk over the end screen so people watch the end screen. I got a Patreon. I get money from Patreon. I got various social media accounts that you can follow so you can see all the funny things I say and do. I don't like this bit.